Chapter 6 Triumphant Return. Their escape was remarkably easy, all things considered. No one attempted to stop them as Swordfish guided his friend through the halls and servants' passages, and when they emerged back into the castle courtyard, the gates were, surprisingly, open again, and with nary a guard in sight to boot. Just an unconscious Hugo not far away and a soldier napping in the stables. Swordfish felt no need to question their luck, and they made a break for it, scampering out into the fields and vanishing into the grassy hills beyond the boundaries of the castle. It was only when he was certain that they were clear of the castle's patrols that Swordfish finally allowed himself to slow down and catch his breath. Pondhopper did much the same, flopping over onto her back on a patch of soft grass. The frogs settled down patiently around them, occasionally croaking or ribbiting. He turned to look at Pondhopper again. He recalled the beating she had taken during their scuffle with Hugo. Thankfully, she didn't look any worse for wear, other than resting a claw against her side where Hugo kicked her. If she had any sort of injury there, Swordfish couldn't see it under her sweater. Swordfish burst out laughing. Pondhopper cracked open an eye, glaring at him from the side.
"What is so funny?"
she demanded.
"You're still wearing the sweater,"
Swordfish said, snickering into his claws.
"You look cute, Hopper."
Pondhopper's pink face turned a shade of red as she looked away from him. Her tail lashed against the ground.
"Not cute,"
she snarled, adorably, in Swordfish's opinion. Swordfish chuckled again, rolling onto his side.
"Hey, come on, it's a compliment. I'm a dragon, a cute dragon."
Pondhopper didn't dignify that with words, just an angry little roar as she tossed her claws in the air, then sprawled lazily on the ground. Her cheeks puffed up in indignation, and her lips pressed into a pout. Swordfish chuckled before flopping onto his back again. The two lay there in silence for a time, surrounded by the gentle whistling of the air through the grass and the soft call of crickets singing their nighttime chorus. The moon had traveled a fair distance across the sky in the time Swordfish had been crawling through the castle. He must have been in there for quite a while. He took some slow, deep breaths, savoring the quiet, the breeze, and the satisfaction of a job well done, a quest completed. The mere thought made his lips twitch up into a small smile. He'd actually pulled it off. He had gone on a quest to rescue his friend, and he had done it. That said, there was still one small concern he had. He turned to Pondhopper.
"Hey, Hopper? Do you think they're gonna be okay? Huh?"
Swordfish sat up onto his haunches.
"The princess and the prince. Do you think they're gonna be okay?"
Pondhopper shrugged.
I mean, the prince is a frog, so I'm not sure how okay they can be,"
she said bluntly.
"Well, yeah, but hey, if he got turned into a frog, maybe he can get turned back into a man."
Swordfish nodded his head at his reasoning.
"Maybe true love's kiss or something."
Pondhopper stuck out her tongue in abject revulsion.
Ugh! Oh, do not start talking about love. I can't stand it.
She rolled over to bury her face in the dirt. Swordfish frowned at her blatant dismissal of the sweetest of all emotions, then shook his head. Hopper would be Hopper, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it.
"What about you?"
he asked a moment later.
"How are you holding up? You all right?" "I'm alive, and I'm out of that stupid castle,"
Hopper snipped, finally pushing herself up until she was sitting on her haunches.
"Ow, I'm good. Sore, stiff, tired, but good."
She paused for a moment, her face lowering before she flashed Swordfish a small, timid smile.
Thanks again.
Swordfish grinned. He scooted up to her until they were side by side and draped a wing over her shoulders in an affectionate side hug.
Aw, anytime, Hopper. You do the same for me.
Hopper did not answer. Swordfish nudged her in the side.
Right?
Hopper let out an exasperated sigh before playfully shoving him off of her with a laugh.
Okay, fine, yes, I would save you too, Swordfish. Silly dork.
Swordfish flashed her the biggest grin he could.
I knew you cared.
Pondhopper rolled her eyes.
Yeah, just keep it down, would you? I got a reputation to maintain.
She stood back up. She gave a languid stretch, and a few satisfying pops came from her back.
Oof. Now, come on. Let's go home. I'm eager to get to bed on the right pile of junk. I thought it was your hoard.
Swordfish asked lightly as he fell into step behind his friend.
You know what I mean.
Hopper shot back, flaring her wings at him.
I'm tired. Give me a break. Okay. Let's go home.
The first light of the morning sun was starting to peek over the horizon by the time Swordfish and Pondhopper were finally back in familiar territory. They were both exhausted after everything. Were it not for the slowly building storm of anxiety in Pondhopper's chest, she might have collapsed the second they were back amid the stones. But she knew there was something she had to do first. As she and Swordfish emerged onto the rocky slopes of their home, Hopper came to a stop. Her gaze locked onto the spire of stone further up, where she knew her mother was most likely slumbering. A pit formed in her stomach at the thought of confronting her, of admitting to her how much of a fool she had been, that she had let herself be captured by a human. But, of course, her mother would already know. Swordfish would have gone to her first. The little guy had a good heart, and that meant he would have told her mother that she was in danger before anything else. So all that was left was to present herself to her mother to receive her punishment. Up ahead, Swordfish drew to a halt and looked back at her.
Hopper? Something wrong?
Hopper shifted uncomfortably on her feet.
No.
She lied, trying to save face.
I'm just a little tired.
Swordfish, of course, read her like the open book she was to him. A sympathetic smile spread on his face.
You're scared to see your mom, aren't you? No.
Swordfish quirked a brow.
Okay, fine, yes. If you tell anyone...
Pondhopper growled, rolling her eyes. Swordfish just shook his head, drawing a claw across his sealed lips. Pondhopper relaxed slightly. As much of a doofus as Swordfish could be sometimes, he was a dragon of his word.
I can go with you, if it would make you feel better.
Swordfish offered with a smile.
I mean, she's probably going to want to talk to me anyway. I'm the one who ran off to get you.
Pondhopper would never admit it, but the idea did make her feel better. She smiled at Swordfish.
Yeah, sure, that's, whatever. But,
She looked down at her sweater and pawed gently at her bow.
Let me stop by my hoard real quick and drop these off. I am not interested in talking to Mom looking like a princess's pet. Like a total twit, yes.
Swordfish laughed again.
Oh, come on. It doesn't look that bad.
Pondhopper growled at him, uncomfortably pawing at the sweater's collar.
Swordfish, I swear,
she warned him with a growl, her cheeks flushing again.
Shut!
Swordfish didn't stop snickering, but he did stop teasing her. She scampered off for the chamber that held her personal hoard. A long, narrow crevice in the ground led to a tight-fit entrance into a large cavern. The air smelled staler than usual as she pushed her way inside, but she wasn't about to complain about that. And there, just up ahead, just as she had left it, was her hoard. A mound of gold, silver, platinum, rubies, sapphires, and a collection of fresh pink strawberry-scented candles. A tiny smile graced her lips when she spied her raven, Pebble, sleeping off to one side. The raven was on his back, eyes closed, legs kicked up in the air, and... was that his tongue sticking out the corner of his beak?
Always the dramatic one,
Pondhopper thought with a roll of her eyes. Moving carefully, so as not to damage the fine material, Pondhopper slowly untied the big blue bow and pulled off her sweater. The movement drew a hiss of discomfort out of her, as the fabric brushed against her side where Hugo had kicked her. She gave the scales a glance once the sweater was off to see that a large, ugly bruise had formed on the soft scales under her wing. She huffed. Just another sign that she had been bested in that fight. If it hadn't been for Swordfish. Shaking away that macabre notion, Hopper lay her sweater down on top of her mound of coins, then draped her bow over Pebble. The raven let off a quiet chirp and snuggled into the makeshift blanket. Hopper watched him for a moment, before looking back to her hoard. Every fiber of her being was screaming at her to go and sleep, but she knew she had to see her mother first.
No more delays,
she thought.
Let's get this over with.
Swordfish was waiting for her outside. He gave her a silent nod as she emerged, then fell into step beside her as she began the long climb for the Hill of the Merciless. Hopper's heart beat harder and faster as they trekked up the slope. The narrow walls of the passage were increasingly claustrophobic. Still, she did her best to keep her anxiety contained, not letting a twitch show on her face. Even though the only one around was Swordfish, and he knew she was scared. She still held on to her practiced mask. Finally, the two hatchlings came out of the passage and emerged into the threatening, natural arena that served as Avorix's lair. Up ahead, Hopper could see the tip of her mother's tail poking out of her bed. She came up short, not sure of what to say. She turned briefly to Swordfish. He smiled and gave her an encouraging nod.
Okay, let's just go in and get it done,
Hopper told herself. She took one last moment to steady her nerves, stepped forward, and loudly cleared her throat. There was a beat of silence before Avorix stirred. The ground trembled fearfully under the Elder Dragon's mass as she slowly rose. Pondhopper watched, trying to hide her awe and fear as her mother slowly rose up from the spires, her bone-white scales glistening like silver in the morning sunlight. The ground lurched as Avorix stepped out of her lair. Coins scraped and scattered across the stone, sent flying by the dragon's imposing bulk. Hopper held her ground, digging her claws into the grass beneath her to keep herself rooted in place. Avorix studied her for a moment.
Pondhopper,
she said by way of greeting.
You have returned.
Pondhopper resisted the urge to swallow the lump forming in her throat.
Yes, I have. The humans thought they could hold me, and they were wrong.
Avorix stared at her for several seconds, her eyes narrowed with scrutiny. They shifted past Hopper to Swordfish, who Hopper knew would be kneeling by now. The Elder Dragon's lips twitched into a small smile. A low, rolling earthquake of a laugh came out of her before she threw her head back and the quake turned to thunder. Pondhopper blinked, surprised by the reaction.
Mother?
She asked before she could stop herself.
Oh, dearest Pondhopper, my child,
Avorix said once her mirth died down. Her head slithered down towards her, her eyes alight with a mixture of delight and fascination.
You need not hide the truth from me. You were rescued.
Hopper hesitated, her muscles tensing up.
I had help, yes.
Avorix chuckled again. She turned her eyes to Swordfish.
You impress me, hatchling. To venture into the heart of enemy territory as you did takes no small amount of courage. That, or stupidity.
Swordfish wisely said nothing. Avorix turned her eyes back to Pondhopper.
Now, my Pondhopper, I trust that you have learned something from this ordeal of yours.
Pondhopper nodded, lowering her head.
Yes, Mother.
You are a dragon, the child of Avorix the Merciless.
Avorix went on slowly.
You have every reason to feel proud of who you are. Proud of your name, your lineage, and your legacy. But in your youthful inexperience, you confuse draconic pride with arrogance. You snap your jaws at prey you are not ready to consume. And the cub that bites at the lion shall find they are the one being eaten.
Yes, Mother.
I will hear no objections to you remaining confined within these peaks until the moon waxes full again.
I won't object, Mother.
Avorix nodded slowly. The earth sighed beneath her as she stood tall and turned back for her bed.
Good. Now come. The hour is yet early. You are tired, and I could do with some more rest myself.
Pondhopper blinked, confused.
Mother?
Avorix smiled back at her.
My child, you have returned from a harrowing experience, and I would feel your warmth again. It has been too long.
What? Mom!
Pondhopper groaned and looked away, covering her face with her wings. And she blushed at the realization that Swordfish had just overheard how Hopper used to sleep in her mother's hoard with her. Now, granted, that was years ago, when she was a tiny hatchling, but still, it wasn't dignified. Avorix only laughed. Oh, she knew exactly what she was doing. This was just another part of Hopper's punishment, wasn't it? With a sigh, Hopper folded back her wings and turned to Swordfish. He was giving her a big smile.
Go on,
He said quietly.
go get some rest. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, sure.
Hopper mumbled, her wings ruffling against her sides. Swordfish grinned. Before Hopper had a chance to say anything, he turned and scampered away, vanishing into the crags. Hopper stared after him for several long seconds. She then let out a quiet sigh and dragged herself up into Avorix's hoard. The mountain of silver and platinum shimmered like the surface of the ocean in the morning light. Avorix lay spread across it on her side, her belly exposed, and a knowing smirk on her face.
Did you have to mention it in front of Swordfish?
Hopper groaned as she hauled herself up for her mother's exposed chest scales. Avorix draped her wing over Pondhopper, blanketing her in a furnace of warmth.
Of course I did. Now sleep, child. We shall speak more once we are rested.
Right.
Hopper lay down against Avorix's chest. She could feel the steady rise and fall of her mother's chest with every breath, feel the raw power contained within. She had fallen asleep to that power many times when she was younger, dreaming dreams of one day being just as feared, just as notorious as the great Avorix the Merciless. All the tension, exhaustion, and tiredness from the events of the last few days finally caught up to her, and she almost fell asleep then and there. Before she could, though, her mother spoke again.
This friend of yours, Swordfish.
What about him?
Hopper asked tiredly.
He's a good sort. Keep him close.
Pondhopper blinked, looking up into her mother's eyes.
Huh?
Avorix curled her neck protectively around Pondhopper and closed her eyes.
We dragons are beasts of isolation more often than not. It can be a lonely existence. Gold and treasure fill the void, but only the company of another dragon can make it shine. A lesson I learned too late, after your father disappeared.
Pondhopper didn't say anything. She knew next to nothing about her father, nor did she care to ask. Still, thinking about Swordfish, that dorky little blue dragon surrounded by his unconventional horde of little frogs, it made her smile.
Don't worry.
She murmured, cuddling up to her mother a little more.
I won't be letting him run off. He's a good friend.
I am glad to hear it.
As sleep reached for Pondhopper, she found the strength to say one more thing.
Even if he has no idea how to be a dragon,